Welcome to Autism Today, a show that we hope will provide important and helpful information for families of children with autism and the general community. Today we're going to talk about something that I think is just important for everyone. And we know that the United States has an epidemic of childhood obesity and children that are just not leading healthy lifestyles. And for individuals with autism, this is actually a more serious problem. We're going to talk to two women who know a lot about this issue. On my immediate right, we have Dr. Linda Meyer, who is the Executive Director of Autism New Jersey. And to her right, we have Randy Horowitz, who's the Associate Executive Director of the Eden 2 programs. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
So let's start with really I think the first question is, why is it so important that we think about nutrition and fitness and health for children with autism? What makes them at greater risk than the typical child?
Well, if we think first about why nutrition and health and fitness is good for every child, just like you said, the majority of children 2 to 19 years of age in the United States are overweight.
Right.
And when you look at autism specifically, 16% of individuals with autism are overweight and 36% are at risk for being overweight. So half of the population of people with autism in the country are at risk for being overweight.
And what makes that? Why are they so much more at risk than the typical child?
We think that individuals with autism are more at risk for being overweight because of inactivity, and it's the characteristics of the disorder. Autism affects people's ability to communicate. They frequently have challenging behaviors and poor social skills, and so that really restricts and limits their opportunities to get out and be in the community and to learn skills. Fitness skills and skills leading to better health are skills that need to be taught and systematically taught for kids with autism.
And also, a lot of teenagers, typically developing teenagers, they're very self-conscious about their bodies, and their friends give them feedback about what kind of clothing looks nice on them and, you know, how they look. And kids with autism don't access those interactions necessarily, and they don't always respond to the same kind of feedback from peers as typically developing kids. So they might not notice that they're not looking good or that their clothes are too tight, and they don't have the same kind of reactions to those situations as typical teenagers.
Right. They don't have the planning skills either, you know. I mean, if I didn't think eating 7,000 potato chips would make me even larger than I am, I would just do it. And I think that not being able to think about the consequences, et cetera. So really, it's up to us as teachers and as parents to try and look out for their health and safety. I know that many of the learners that I've worked with are overweight and ultimately are at risk for health problems that they even have a harder time talking to us about because of their lack of communication skills. So I know both of you have really done a lot in the last decade to try and address this issue. And really, I think you're leading the pack in this. It's something that I don't think enough people are thinking about. What are some things that you guys have done? What type of programs have you developed? And maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the outcomes and what's happening with this.
Sure, I like to work a lot with individuals with autism on a one-on-one basis and include them in opportunities for fitness and recreation in their typical communities where their family members might choose to participate in recreational activities. So I do a lot more one-on-one training, focusing on teaching individuals to, for instance, run. If you teach an individual to run, and they perhaps could then participate in community road races, and Randy's the expert in community road races.
Yeah, well, you know, at Eden, we're always torn between how much extracurricular activity do we do during the school day compared to how much intensive and one-to-one instruction in the traditional classroom environment. So we're very careful when we design school-wide programs that we look at what the research tells us is components of an effective program. So whether we're developing a running club or preparing our learners to participate in a mainstream race, we're always looking at those components, like are staff trained in the principles of behavior analysis? Are they able to prompt and redirect in those contexts? Are the parents supportive of the program? Do they have opportunities to participate? So when we kind of followed those guidelines, we implemented a school-wide running program for some of the adolescents in our Staten Island school program. And about once a week, we went on inclement weather days to the local YMCA. They gave us access to their track, and we had a running club go to the track once a week, staff and kids together, and it was just such a wonderful experience for the kids to be in that community environment, engaging in those healthy activities. The parents loved the program so much they asked us to do it for the little kids, so we developed the Pee Wee Running Club at Eden, and that's on Wednesdays, either at Clove Lakes Park or at the track. And in our Long Island school program, we've replicated it, and we have a small group of kids that participate on the trails and the roads that are adjacent to our school there.
So both of you are runners, and I'm a runner. And think about what it must be like to try and get, I mean, if you can go back to the days when you first started running, how it wasn't fun. And your motivation to run may be very different. But so how did you get kids with autism to go? I remember one of the kids, Randy, that we worked with, kept throwing himself to the ground. He had no interest in it. So how do you get a child with autism who doesn't have the communication skills or the motivation to get through to the point where he is now running marathons? Like, how did you do that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's individualized, and we conduct preference assessments and try to find the most highly motivating reinforcers for our students with anything that we teach. And we look at teaching fitness routines and teaching running as behaviors that we want to increase. Some of our kids, like Jonathan, if we give him a playlist on an iPad, and he's very motivated by listening to certain songs that we might restrict his access to during activities other than running. So we pair his favorite songs with running, which gives him the motivation to continue. A lot of our kids are motivated by what they get to eat after the race, like the bagels and the Gatorade, and so we've restricted access to things like red Gatorade for crossing the finish line. You get that kind of thing. So,
right.
I mean, and those are some typical things that, you know, typical people go through when they're trying to increase their distances. So we have a variety of things that we do. One of our kids is very, very motivated by interacting with people at the water stations. So we put some water stations in our practice routes to get him used to jogging from point A to point B, which was a water station, which was rewarding. Those kinds of things.
So, I mean, obviously running is one big variable, and what's nice about the running that you're doing and we've been doing with our kids is it does give them real typical activities, and it's part of the family. Then they can do things with the family. What else besides? What if running just isn't in that kid's future?
Well, if I could talk about running just for a minute, we frequently choose running because it is a family activity, and research is very clear that you want to pick an activity for the individual with autism that the family can then support. It's great that we have running clubs and kids participate in their own high school cross-country meets, but then you want to make sure that it carries over into the family, into the home, and some of our preliminary research indicates that when you get a kid with autism involved in particularly running or in any exercise program, that their families join in. Randy, you did some work on that?
Yeah, we sent a survey home to the families that participated in the running club, and we asked how often do you participate in physical fitness and exercise routines with your kids? We asked that before we initiated the running club, and it was a very low percentage of parents and siblings that were doing things together as a family. 6 months after the running club, we sent the survey home and we said, now how often do you participate? And the numbers went up quite a lot.
Right.
And just to move away from running, because of our access to the YMCA, the students in our school got Strong Kids cards, which meant that they had access to all of the YMCAs in Staten Island and in the city, and so their families have since joined, and now we have siblings and parents that are teaching other fitness routines related to, you know, weight training and some yoga classes and aerobic classes that the families are kind of doing together, which has been really nice.
Right. There's some nice research that indicates that I think swimming is a very important sport for families to do together. Walking is very high rated and preferable by families.
Right.
So those are the types of things you want to teach the kids with autism.
I think the most important point here, I think, in addition to the fact that obviously this type of exercise, running, swimming, biking, will lead to a healthier lifestyle, but more importantly, parents sometimes will need the support of their school really to get them started on this. And I think, you know, that's what you're basically saying is if a parent can do it on their own, more power to them.
Right.
But a lot of our kids, I mean, you know, for example, how do you know when a child with autism that you're running with is not feeling well? How do you know if you're running him too fast, or what are some things that you guys do to ensure that you are addressing that
Right. Well, health and safety is really important to us, and I think we consider that more than other people do, and we have a reason to do that. These are individuals with autism can't tell you when we're working them out too hard, so there are some standard measures of endurance and participation in running, for instance, or aerobic activity. One's the talk test. You have a conversation with the person who's engaging in aerobic activity, and it's thought that if you can carry on a conversation, then you are breathing and that your heart rate is not too high as long as you can continue to speak. So that's a really general measure, but it's a really good measure. So it's important that our kids with autism can respond to simple social questions because they don't generally initiate during running.
Right.
So you have to teach social commenting during running, and you have to get them to respond 100% of the time to social questions. Where do you live? Do you like running? How do you feel? Engage them in conversation. So the talk test is one. But the second one is we frequently ask them to wear heart rate monitors. They can't tell us when they perceive their level of stress to be too high. So we actually take a baseline heart rate measure, and then we know that when you're running, you should be about 65% of your maximum heart rate, and you hook them up to a heart rate monitor, and you continually have them self-monitor, or you self-monitor, or you monitor the heart rate, which is really important, very, very important.
Yeah. Initiating comments and responding to questions happen at very low rates for many of our kids in structured settings at home and school. Many of our kids communicate by pointing to pictures or using some kind of voice output device. We've modified those systems, to, like in the form of a wristband or in the form of some kind of picture symbol that has a Band-Aid, a bathroom, water, and we've taught kids how to, if they need to take a break, point to the bathroom, or if they're not feeling well, to point to the Band-Aid, which would indicate that they're hurt or something like that.
Right.
So
I think that's a really, really important point. We're not just talking about these really high-functioning kids who can talk fluently. We're talking about, in fact, I think really, Randy, the kids at Eden too, many of them are quite challenged by their autism, and I know the young men who are running in the Marine Corps Marathon with you at the end of the month, they're both nonverbal, and they run marathons, and so I think the one other point about running, because we are obviously focusing on that a lot, is that it tends to be inherently reinforcing. Yeah. To a child with autism. Can you just talk a little bit about why that would be? Why this physical activity might be more reinforcing?
I'm thinking of one particular student who just likes to rush through everything, and his reinforcer is completing something from beginning to end. So a start line and a finish line is the perfect opportunity for him to get from point A to point B as fast as he can. So I think he's naturally reinforced by just completing the task or the activity. So the challenge is finding somebody who could keep up with him, because teaching him to slow down has taken a longer amount of time than teaching him how to run.
Yeah, he's went from not running at all to running less than 6-minute miles in a marathon. It's pretty incredible. Yeah. We just have a minute or so before the break. So when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about just some suggestions for parents, some suggestions for teachers, and fitness in general. But is there anything else, any kind of story you want to talk about with the running before we take a break? I know you've got 2 kids running the Marine Corps.
And 1 student running in the New York City Marathon on November 6th, which is really exciting. And a couple of the boys that are running, their parents are running with them, which is a really nice thing for their families to be able to do this together. And one of the dads will tell you that he can't have conversations with his son, and they don't really bond too much on different subjects because of the communication and behavioral deficits. But being on the course together is something really very special for them. So it's exciting. That's great. Really exciting.
Yeah, I know this family, and it really is nice to have this sort of very special opportunity to be able to do together, something that they didn't have before running. Okay, terrific. We'll be back in a minute, and we'll talk some more about some of the issues in terms of helping parents and teachers. Welcome back to the second part of Autism Today. So we're going to continue our discussion with our 2 guests about health and fitness and exercise in general. I know we've talked a lot about the getting the kids running, getting the kids to gyms, et cetera. And I had said that we really need the support of the staff, et cetera. But before I do that, I just remembered that I'm wearing my Blazing Trails for Autism sweatshirt, in case people wondered why I changed. And Randy is also wearing her Blazing Trails for Autism sweatshirt. This sweatshirt, maybe you could just talk for 2 seconds about the Blazing Trails run.
Yeah, in Long Island, we started a road race that is part of the Greater Long Island Running Club series of events, and it's a fundraiser for our school, and it's on the campus of Great Neck High School, so we have a lot of participation from the Great Neck community, the Greater Long Island community, and many of our students and staff, they train during the school year to be able to participate and complete the 4 miles.
Yeah.
So it's a really nice day for everybody.
What's awesome about it, and then we'll get back to our the show, but what's awesome about it is that so many families of children with autism, whether they're in our program or other programs, come to this run and bring their kids, because it's a run and a walk, so it's sort of a fun run. But we had over 1,000 runners last year, so it's a real, and it raises autism awareness. So it's a terrific event, and I look forward to it. All right, Linda, let's talk about the obstacles. So since I suggested that we really need staff and schools to kind of lead the charge and help parents to achieve this kind of programming for the kids. What are the obstacles? Why isn't everybody running out and setting up health and fitness programs?
Well, it starts with the parents first. And when you try to get involved in an exercise program yourself or something new, or start moving when you haven't moved in a while, you think a lot about it. And in fitness training lingo, we actually talk about pre-contemplation. Even before contemplation, that you have to think about getting into an exercise program. So it's hard. So it's a good place to start is to ask parents, what do you hope to get out of a fitness program for your child with autism? And you hope they say things like inclusion opportunities, to participate with age-matched neurotypical peers, or inclusion in the family. And you hope that they say fitness goals as well, health and fitness goals. But then you need help, because physical fitness needs to be taught like any other skill to kids with autism, and that's a huge obstacle. Very rarely do you find an individual who understands autism, understands exercise science principles, and also understands learning principles.
Right.
So it's important that you get the right people to support you in the right school program or the right fitness facility.
Right.
Agreed. Some of the obstacles in doing like a school-wide program is the lack of funding. Our tuition rates barely cover the costs of our, staffing patterns and our traditional type of curriculum. So to do something that requires transportation to and from the park or to the local gym, that sometimes requires membership, that requires stuff that can be costly. So we rely a lot on foundations and grants to help support that program. And once we get the funding, then it's a matter of getting teachers to really buy in during the school day, to going out and getting really sweaty with the kids. And maybe our new building will have a locker room and proper facilities for our staff to kind of freshen up. But sending them out on a Monday morning at 10 o'clock to the park and then having them come back and not giving them a chance to shower and freshen up, there was some resistance at the beginning, and having to wear the proper clothes and train the staff to be fit enough to accompany some of the kids, because the kids generally are physically fit and healthy and can participate once they learn the skills.
Yeah.
So training up the staff, getting parents to support the program, and funding it is some stuff that has to be in place.
I know that a number of kids with autism are very overweight, and it's almost a shame that we let it go to the point where many of them are so overweight, because food is a high preference to them. So really, I guess, surveillance would be a good thing for programs to do as well, because I think parents are probably embarrassed that their kids that's all they do is eat. They just enjoy eating. But one of the nice side outcomes, I think, of a good exercise program is that kids can go back to just pretty much eating what they want. Wouldn't you say it's a positive outcome?
Well, we wouldn't want them to eat anything that they want, but individuals with autism frequently have limited food choices, and so many of the activities that they engage in revolve around food. They go to the movies, they have food. They go out to dinner as a leisure activity. So you're right, it's calories in, lots and lots of calories in. And by instituting a fitness program, an exercise program, it's calories out. And it's basic numbers. You want to expend more calories than you take in, and you should see a reduction in your weight. And the good news is that you don't really need to change your diet if you increase your activity level.
Right.
It's simple math.
Yeah, so if we can get the kids to enjoy the exercise programs, then we don't have to restrict their food access as much as we would if they were not exercising, obviously.
And 2 examples. I know Linda has a lot of data on the percentage of time per day or per week kids should be engaged in physical fitness activities, but we had 2 teenagers participate in a pilot program that we did at the Broadway Y. They were just going 1 time a week during our after-school program. Nothing else changed. Diet, exercise stayed the same. One young girl lost 7 pounds over 4 months just from that 1 day a week that she was engaged in this extra activity. And one young man was at the Y once a week after school, and he was jogging with his teacher 2 times a week during the week, and nothing else changed. And he also lost weight, which was one of his goals. So even a little bit for some of our kids is really have a big impact.
That's great. In a second, I'm going to ask you about some suggestions and tips for teachers and parents. But one thing I think that is important to think about as well, and I know we were talking about this during the break, as our children grow up and they become adolescents and adults and we begin to prepare for the work world, most of our kids are not going to be sitting in an office answering phones, right? They're just not going to be, many of them are going to be up and about. And just talk a little bit about some of the sort of findings that we found about stamina and the ability of our kids to actually do the jobs that they're going to get down the road because they're just not fit.
I know the 3 of us have been in the autism world for decades. And we've seen kids grow up. Right. And when we start with a kid at age 3 and focus on certain curricula areas during the school day, then as they start to get older, you want to think about how they should spend their time. And when we began to include kids in supported volunteer and work environments, we saw an increase in verbal protests and challenging behaviors and aggression because they didn't have the strength or the flexibility or the endurance to do their job. And they couldn't stand on their feet. So now we've learned that we build endurance from a very early age, and Randy's been really successful in building endurance by taking children's chairs away.
I'm not mean or anything, just getting them used to, I mean, our research tells us structured, one-to-one, intensive, teacher and student kind of interaction where the kids are sitting down a lot. Right. So we said, how about if the kids have to stand, or some of their lessons are being taught, in a more active kind of a way. So one of the marathoners who's going to be in the New York Marathon, we did a lot of that with him when he was younger, just to get him out of the chair and up and moving.
Well, think about it, right? Our kids are going to be in a program until they're 21 years old. I would argue that 95%, 6 hours probably of their day is spent sitting. Because if they have gym, it's 3 times a week, or, and so 5.5 hours a day they're sitting, and then they graduate and they get a job, working in CVS, facing shelves, and they're standing for 6.5, 8 hours. And many of them do all of a sudden say, wait a second. Okay, yeah, so I think that's a really important thing, thinking about the future and planning for it. So now let's talk a little bit about some things that you would suggest that let's start with what parents can do. What are some things that parents can do if they aren't lucky enough to have programs like yours?
Well, parents can make the right decisions for their children by starting and picking the right fitness program. Frequently, parents will say to me, would you go look at this exercise program or this fitness program or rec program to see if it's meeting my children's needs? And I say, well, what are your needs? What are your goals for this particular fitness program? So parents would say, well, I want my child in this fitness program so that they could be healthier and fit. And when I look at the components of that particular recreation program, perhaps that the level of aerobic activity isn't intense enough or long enough to actually be beneficial. Right. So then that's not the reason you're in the program. So then the parent might say, well, I want my child to have the benefits of socialization opportunities. But when I observe, there aren't specific opportunities to socialize. So then again, that's not the right program. Some parents want their children to participate in team sports. That's often difficult for individuals with autism because they don't understand the concept of competition. Right. So they have to be taught competition and the skills leading to team sports. And so finally, many parents are placing their children in recreation and fitness programs in local facilities for respite. And I say yes. Fine, your child.
Respite for the parent.
For the parent. Right. Respite opportunities for the parent, and that's fine. But I've developed a checklist, and it's on the Autism Speaks website right now on helping parents to make decisions on what particular fitness program would best meet their current family's needs.
And I think parents have to start thinking about allocating time and resources. It takes a lot of our kids a very long time to acquire skills, whether they're academic skills, hygiene skills, physical fitness skills, communication skills. So we know it's going to take our kids a long time to learn some of the routines that they need to be successful in gyms and in community races. So parents have to start thinking about, do they want to invest all of this time in these activities? And then what are the consequences? Like, if your kid's a naturally talented athlete, then you have to be one of those parents who have to go to the cross-country meets and who has to get up at 4 or 5 in the morning to go to the races and do all the things that, you know, that require sacrificing other activities and other family opportunities. So I think most of our parents would feel that that's a blessing to have that opportunity.
I think the other thing I might suggest too is that, you know, the IEP is their contract with the school.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I consider our program, Eden 2 program, really to take the lead on it. We want to be able to help our parents with their kids, but sometimes you don't have that kind of school program. And so if you then can go to your school and say, I want fitness programs to be on my child's IEP, it obligates the school then to do that. If you've got a 7-year-old child and he's already significantly overweight, that child's going to be overweight probably for the rest of his life.
It's very important that the parents monitor whatever fitness programs are going on in a school or in a fitness facility. So for instance, we see children who might be enrolled in a swim program, but I would probably call it a go to the locker room, get in your bathing suit, dip in the pool and come out program, that the opportunity to swim or learn the skill of swimming, which is so important, it just never gets accomplished. And again, the teachers need to be trained in fitness. So often I see children on exercise schedules and they're engaging in exercise activities that they cannot possibly derive any fitness benefit.
Right, I think that's really important. We're actually coming to the end of this segment, so I do want to very quickly talk about some things that teachers can do, but your point is really important, Linda. Putting a child on a treadmill for 6 minutes every day and then calling that exercise is silly, right? It's about deriving real benefit, and I think that's a very important point. We were guilty of that for a long time at Eden too.
Sure.
You know, oh yeah, Johnny's on an exercise program and he lifts weights for 8 seconds and stands on the treadmill, but no benefit really. Yeah. So Randy, any suggestions for teachers?
Well, I think it's all about preparing kids to be successful. So when you're looking at the curriculum for the kids in your class, it's important to look at what skills can I teach them here that will have the best impact and the best chances for successful and meaningful participation in other environments. So if you're teaching some of your kids to drink from a water bottle, for example, using a variety of water bottles, from a cup, from a bottle, like, you know, just be creative about the kind of examples you want your kids to practice with. Many of our kids can't tolerate wearing certain, you know, material or certain types of pants or sneakers. So teachers ought to think about how to desensitize, you know, their students to wearing a running outfit or tolerating having the pin, you know, the bibs pinned onto their shirt. Some of those kinds of things are important, and even just more academic curriculum for some of our adolescents and young adults to start talking about things like, you know, races and the definitions of what some of these things are, and, you know, you could change the vocabulary around to make it more functional and meaningful for the kids.
That's great. I think, I hope you guys don't mind, but I'd love to be able to at least give an email, and if there's a program out there that wants to get a running group started or a fitness program started, if they had a question, that they might be able to send you an email, and you could just direct them to something or give them some of the benefits of what you guys have done. Any last minute pointers?
When you open up a world of fitness and health opportunities for kids with autism, you open up a network for inclusion opportunities and for not only in the family, but for a lifetime.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the most amazing, quick little stories is we have a young man with autism who is very significantly challenged. We would never leave this kid out of our sight. He started to run a 5K. His dad was going to run with him. And he took off because he ran much, much faster than his dad. And that was it. Everybody was panicked because he was alone in this race of thousands. And there he was, 25 minutes later, crossing the finish line. And everybody was just like, wow, he just did this all by himself. So it's really unbelievable accomplishments. Thank you both very much. And I hope you'll come back again and we'll talk some more down the road in another show.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.